Today we're going to be drawing and painting a robin in the snow using ink and watercolour. But before we do that, we need to put some pencil guidelines down. So I'm going to be working on an SAA practice paper, which is a watercolour paper, and that's about £140 in weight, I think. And just making a very simple shape with the pencil. And I have done a video on this before, showing you how to make a bird using a couple of obelisks and joining those up together. So I will link that both here and down below in the description. So don't go overboard with making too much detail with your pencil. These are just guidelines to work from, just positioning the various parts. Just look carefully where his eyes sit in relation to his beak and his legs and his wing and everything else. Just line things up together. Okay, so once you've got your pencil guidelines there, you can move on to putting an ink drawing on top of him, because we're going to come on and erase those guidelines later on. So you want a nice fine pen, and you want your pen to be waterproof, because obviously we're going to be putting the paints over the top, and you also want it to be fade proof so that it lasts for a while. So I'm using a black pen, and I'm using one that's a size 0.5. You don't want a very big, thick, heavy nib to your pen, because it's a very small little bird. You don't want to make it too heavy. You want to get those little fluffy bits in with some nice fine lines. So whilst you're using your pen, you'll see that I use very short little lines rather than trying to do one very big long line. And with something that's fluffy and feathery, this gives you that impression of those. So I've not drawn each feather in detail. I've not put all the feathers there as you can see them, because it's a very, very clear photograph that I'm using. This photograph is off Pixabay, and I will link that down in the description below, the reference photograph, so that you can go and have a look at it there. So I'm not doing every little feather, I'm just looking at the shape of the bird and the direction of the feathers. So make some of your lines go in the direction that the feathers are going in, so you can carefully look at that and spend quite a bit of time with that. And as I say in lots of my videos, it's entirely up to you how much detail you want to put in. I wanted to keep it quite simple and light. It might be something that you want to use on something like a Christmas card, and so you might want to keep it very illustrative, and you could also make it quite cartoony if you wanted to. The idea here wasn't really to do an ultra realistic drawing and painting, it was more to do something quite illustrative. So keep those nice little short lines with your pen. Do a bit of shading as well. Look where he's the darkest. Obviously he's very dark in his eye, little areas of his beak, and his wing is casting some shadow on his body, so you want to get some dark lines under there too. Look carefully at his feet. It looks a little bit like a dinosaur foot, that one at the front. If you look at it very carefully, you can see it looks very leathery. I've made a bit of a mistake with the ink and his feet. I altered it from the original photograph because I wanted it to look like he was stood on something more natural on the snow, rather than on that metal thing that he's standing on the photograph. And I've managed to make it look as if he's had his foot chopped off, or as if his foot's sort of planted in the snow somehow and his tail's stuck in the snow. So I do some corrections on that right at the end of the video. I think it's important for me to leave in my mistakes and show you how to correct those. So it's very difficult when you're drawing in ink to correct things, but because I quite liked him, how he was going, I didn't want to abandon it altogether. So I did do a little bit of work on that foot at the end. So the colours, the temptation is with a robin is to think that of course he's red, because we've been programmed to think that he's red, but of course he isn't. If you look very carefully at this photograph, there's a lot more orange and yellow in there than there is red. But I've chosen 3 colours. I've put some quinacridine yellow and some, what was the red? Cadmium red, and some cadmium orange on there, and let it all meld together. So often you'll look at videos of teaching you how to do watercolour, and they'll either be painting wet on wet or wet in dry. When reality, as you get going with your watercolours and as you do more and more, what you actually end up doing is a combination of the two, which is what I've done here. So I set off with the red breast and did that all wet in wet, allowed that to dry, and then did some extra bits. And then after I'd done all those feathers and the wing and the tail and everything around about, I let that dry and then put some more detailed colour on top of that with the darks, like I say, where the underneath of the tail and the eye and everything was, where it's a lot darker, just put a little bit more detail. But again, like we said with the pencil drawing, don't put loads of detail in. It's with your paints, just keep it nice and loose. So the colours I used on his body were cerulean blue, cobalt blue and burnt sienna. So a very good cheats way of making a nice grey and a nice soft grey is to use burnt sienna with one of your blues, rather than mixing your 3 primary colours together, and that makes some really nice greys. So I use the cerulean in him. You can see he's got a lot of blue in there, light reflecting on his tummy and things, that's quite blue. And the cerulean's a really nice cool colour, so it gives you that really wintry feel. And I use that in the sky behind him and in the snow under his feet as well, with a little bit of winds of violet as well, which is a colour I often use in snow. The thing about cerulean blue is that it sort of granulates and moves away from the other pigments. So you get that very sort of wintry feel there, as well as things are looking a bit textured. So how many layers of paint you put on and how thick you want it to be and how detailed you want him to be, again, is a personal choice, but I wanted to keep it very simple and fresh looking. Let the white of the paper shine through if you can. Okay, so I think that's probably everything I need to tell you about that. Make sure your ink is dry before you erase your pencil lines. Allow your little bird to dry between each layers of, between the layers of paint. Allow things to dry properly, and allow him to dry properly before you put your background on, so that he's not, the paint's not rushing out into the sky there. And make sure you take some nice photographs of him as well when you're finished, because you could use it on a Christmas card or something like that if you wanted to. So if you've any questions at all that you want to ask, please do so in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to get back to you as soon as I can. And if you have any questions at any time, an easy way to get in contact with me is on Instagram Messenger. So of course, that's one of my most used social media platforms. So if you go over to Instagram, you can have a look at my own work over there as well. You may have noticed that I've now sorted out my merch account for the Amazon merch. You may have noticed that I've now sorted out my merch, so that's down below. You'll see I've got some t-shirts and things. If there's any design that you particularly would like to see on a t-shirt, any slogan related to your art, or making your art and things like that, if you want to let me know, I'll have a go at doing that for you. So you could go and have a look at those. Okay, anything else I need to tell you? I don't think so. So with snow, keep it nice and fresh, let that white paper shine through, and like I say, cerulean's a lovely snowy cold colour to use, and keep his breast orange rather than red if you look at that. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I'll pop some music on for the rest of the video, and I'll be back again soon with another one, and let me know if there's any particular subjects that you want me to do. And again, I will link that drawing tutorial with how to draw birds down below in the description. Okay, bye bye for now. I'll see you again soon.